fast, efficient and affordable business-grade hosting solutions, domain registration, SSL certificates and more. We also monitor and provide website security and update services, website builds, email hosting amongst other sensational products. If you have a question about your web page or your presence on the internet in general, no job is too big or too small. Visit our website today, or better yet, contact us at blueoceanwebhosting.com.au and leave your website issues to us.
Big ones, little ones, fiddly ones, powerful ones, the ones for the car or the truck, caravan, boat, mobility scooter, solar system. In fact, for any kind of battery, go straight to Battery Central Ipswich. They'll even help you when you know what you need to power, but have no idea what'll do the job. Battery Central Ipswich, 280 Brisbane Street, West Ipswich, behind the Yellow Building. Expert advice, better batteries, best prices, every day. That's Battery Central Ipswich.
Welcome to episode 736 of Aussie Tech Heads. I'm Jason Oakley and this is Will Tompkinson. Hey, Will.
Are you sure?
I'm not sure of anything anymore.
No, right, it's a bit like that at the moment.
How is that? Who are you?
Why do you do what you
visit anymore?
Shit. Why does nobody call me?
I'll call you lots of things. But you can call me Al. I'll call you Betty.
Well, ma.
How's stuff going?
It is somewhat. Well, kind of. Not really, actually. I lie. We're in, being in Brisbane, Greater Brisbane, Ipswich, one of 11 districts or whatever the hell it is, we're a part of lockdown this week. So, yay. You know, that lockdown that I predicted last week that would be, they say, for 3 days, and I'm like, it's going to be at least a week. And it's most likely going to be extended again because we've just got a little schoolwork and stuff handed to us and said, here's the next roster for the next 4 weeks. And it's like, well, okay, what do you guys know? So, we'll see. But, and of course, Melbourne going to lockdown tonight, so you can't visit your family or friends or anything, but you can go to the brothel, so there's that. Yeah. I just said, why don't you just go and hire a room out in the brothel and take your family for the day?
Yeah, kick the prostitute out.
Yeah, just stand around the room.
Or she can sit in the corner, have a join in the conversation.
Yeah.
Have a few nibblies.
You don't need a master or anything, so you just sit in the room.
Ask if they got catering.
And yeah, exactly, order a pizza and, hire the room for an hour. That's what brothels would do. They should make more money if they did that. They don't need to pay the prostitutes, and they can hire the rooms out at an hourly rate. So there's people sneaking around. They're all wearing trench coats and hats and sunnies, and they're sneaking into the brothels. But it's because they're meeting up with their family.
One of the funniest scenes I remember from The Simpsons is when Grandpa Simpson walks into the house of ill repute, and he walks in, takes his hat off, puts it on the stand, turns around, there's Bart, and he keeps turning around, puts his hat on again, and walks back out again.
Oh yeah, I vaguely remember that. It'd be a bit like that actually.
Crazy.
So yeah, no, it's all everyone's just gone mad. But yeah, so we've been pretty dead this week. It's getting to the point where it's actually starting to cost us more to go to work than we're actually making while we're there.
Yep.
And you can't run a business that way for long. So, but
if your name was Jerry, you could have got like $20 million in JobKeeper.
Well, we're really, really lucky that the government's thought of us and is providing for us. A load of crap. They've decided that we're eligible for a $5,000 subsidy that we can apply for next week, that has a 2-week waiting period, then a 2-week application process, and then up to 2 weeks before you get paid. So we can apply for it next week. In 8 weeks' time, we'll get $5,000 for this week that we didn't work.
Jeez. In the meantime, go get a loan.
So as long, because $5,000 goes a long way when you have a small business. That's going to cover nothing.
Biscuits and coffee.
Your smoko for the. It's
there you go. Smoko's covered. What more do you need?
So it's but so basically, if you need batteries or solar or deep cycles or stuff for camping or off grid or granny flats or alternate power of any description or anything like that, or even just hit us up. I can help you out because I'm not pleading or begging or anything. I'm just really, really, really asking really nicely that you help us out. Basically, 'cause,
And you can donate to the Patreon and coffee and stuff.
yeah,
Give it
yeah.
all to Will.
Well, yeah. Well, that goes and covers our the rest of the fees that, you know, whatever that covers, we don't have to. So it helps in a roundabout kind of way.
And you mind to fix your computer?
Yeah, the jury's still out, but it was really bizarre. I'm like, look, the only thing I can think of that I haven't updated, because basically what's happening was every time I'd load something that was graphically intense, the system would lock up. Yep. But I couldn't capture it on any. There's a million programs you can install that will supposedly tell you why your system's freezing. The closest I could get was a Windows system event hardware crash.
Yep.
But it wouldn't tell me what it was. I suspected graphics card because it always happened under a graphically intense situation.
Yep. Not
necessarily ruling out memory or anything, but I had run HiMem, which is a HiMem 30, HiMem 64, or MemTest 64, yep. Which is a dedicated USB boot. You boot up into it, and it specifically is designed to test your memory. I'd run a 24-hour log on that. They reckon you only need to run it for about an hour. I ran it for 24 hours, and it came up fine.
Yep.
I checked all the hardware I could check, and I'm like, the only thing I haven't upgraded is the BIOS. So tonight I thought, before the show, because why not, right? I decided it'd be perfect time to upgrade my BIOS. And I'm looking at all the options, and suddenly all these drivers appeared for this board. Like literally tonight, while I was looking for it, they had all these driver updates for CMOS and for the BIOS and for the some of the
CPU.
Controller chips, and a CPU update and a video card update and sound card and network and Bluetooth and Wi-Fi, and like literally everything you can think of on this board had an update tonight. I'm like, it'll be fine. So
somebody else had a problem too, didn't they?
So I literally downloaded. It was something stupid. It was over a terabyte.
Oh.
Sorry, over a gigabyte of drivers.
Yeah.
Which that's nuts. Like that's a lot. You know. And it was not only the drivers, it was the software, like the ATI Radeon or the graphics driver, the control software, the soundboard controlling software, the because I've got a Ryzen CPU, so there was even specific Ryzen application that they've launched now. There's like every single possible thing you could think of. It was updated. It was insane. I've never seen anything like it. I've never seen a mass rollout of drivers and software and hardware drivers all in the one time frame.
Mad.
It was ridiculous. But anyway, I started at 5 o'clock. I started install. The first thing I did was the BIOS, because I figured once that's the most recent, then everything else should flow. And it wasn't a 0.0's revision. It was literally, the BIOS was actually a full 10 point, like it went up from 1032 to 3032. It actually went up 20 revisions in one update.
Jeez.
And most of the hardware went up a full, if you know how revisions are done, okay, just to give you a brief overview, generally, not always, but generally, you'll get revision 1, then you'll get revision 1.1, then 1.11, then 1.111. Every time they do a revision, depending on how much they change, depends on which incremental digit they change. Normally you'll go from version 3 to, you might have version 3.2, you normally go to version 3.4 or 3.45, But these were like full increment revisions. Like my graphics card went from like version 14.7 to version 19.5. Like massive increment revisions, which I've never seen that happen before.
Yep.
And all of them were the same right across the board. Every update was at least a 1 or 2 full digit revision, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
But after 3 hours of installing updates and everything and resetting stuff back to defaults and making stuff work, so far it seems to have fixed the problem. I don't know which particular update did it, but I'm not complaining, and it's actually faster
now you'll
too.
install Windows 11 and break it all.
Yeah, good luck with that. but it's actually faster. I ran a benchmark before and after.
Yep.
And I don't know the exact numbers, but I'm on average about 12% faster now than I was before the updates.
Nice.
So not
Pretty
only
happy
have
with
I now got a stable system, I've got a actually physically quicker system. And just to have a quick look, I jumped onto Minecraft and loaded a fresh world, or loaded my test world that I load up. I normally get about 100 because there's a lot of redstone contraptions in there to play with. I normally get about 180 frames, somewhere around there. I'm getting 240, standing in exactly the same spot now. So, so something's definitely running better. The system's loading faster. The games are loading faster. I'm getting instant loads every time I load an application or a program. It's happening straight away. Even something like OBS, which is what we use for recording. Normally, when I'd hit the record button, there was a 3-second delay between when I hit record and when it actually started to record.
Yep.
Well, it caught me off guard tonight because it was actually instant. I hit the record button and started recording.
What the what?
So it looks like, for the first time ever, updates actually fix the problem. Like normally, as I said, you'll get a update and it might fix the problem, but yeah,
Or it overwrites your Microsoft overwrites your updates with
exactly.
something else and breaks everything.
Well, yeah, which is what I thought the problem was. And a couple of weeks ago, I went through and so that's how I know they're all new updates. Because only a couple of weeks ago, I literally went through everything and updated everything back to the latest available update at the time, except the BIOS.
Yep.
Because Microsoft has done that in the past, and I'm sure it'll happen again. But it didn't solve the problem.
Yep.
But it did tonight. So whether it was the BIOS update all along, which there wasn't one anyway until tonight.
Good timing that you checked tonight, dude.
Yeah. So far so good. We'll see what happens. I'll know by next week after I've given it a bit of a hard time. But
imagine how good a game of Worms you can play now.
Well, that's assuming we can figure out how to play it.
It had already been 10 seconds and it was boring.
Worms is great. It brings back
Phil
some.
and I downloaded it on Steam and we found a few of them you can play multiplayer on the internet, so we're having a lot of fun when things work like they're supposed to, and a lot of them just
I tell
the
you
weapons
what,
don't make sense. You're like, I'll do this, and it's like, what the hell was that?
I swear the person.
A sheep flew straight up 100 feet and exploded for no reason.
I swear the person who wrote, the game, which was a relatively basic but enjoyable game, was not the same person who wrote the interface for the networking.
Yeah, because serious.
It's
really just based on what was it? They had there's a Canon game or something that they had in the 80s, and it would draw a mountain in high res, and then one on each side.
Yeah, it was tanks,
and you had to aim the right angle with yours to try and hit the other guy, and then they throw in wind to put you off, and eventually you blew up the other guy over the mountain.
Yeah,
or you blew the mountain up and it.
I had that back on. I had that on a few consoles. I had that on a Commodore and Amstrad and a couple others, but that was really basic version. But then they did Worms, which was fantastic. She had different weapons.
Yeah, they just took it to another level and added in personalities for the worms and speech and stuff.
Yeah. It's good fun. But the networking is horrendous. Absolutely.
There's one you get we got the what is it, collector's pack, and you get 10 worm games. 3 of them work over the internet. Others are one player, or you share your screen with somebody else in the house.
Yeah, they work on LAN.
Then one of them, even if you're using over the internet, I had to open a port on the router and point it towards my computer inside the house, because that was the only way to connect.
Even though it could see it, but it couldn't connect to it, which was just bizarre.
And then the other ones, they were just there's no explanation on how you're supposed to make stuff work.
I still
it's
actually
not
don't
intuitive.
I still don't know how we got that one to work last night. It wasn't working. Oh, we're playing.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah. You have to create a party room and then invite your friend to join, and then it only works through the Steam Friends invite, which is weird.
But not directly through the invite, because if you click on the invite, it just takes you to the game.
Yeah. and then a lot of stuff around. But we got it going. Had a few goes. There's a really basic type one where you forward the port, and then there was Was it Armageddon or WMD? I think was the last
WMD,
one we played. That
yeah.
was probably the only one worthwhile to play over the
I
internet.
didn't like the 3D one. It was just
The controls are terrible.
whoever designed the controls never actually played the game.
That's right.
You can't. It's impossible. You cannot physically play the game with those controls.
If you know how to do it, email Will at AussieTechheads.com.
I know how you do it. You got to stand on your head and use your toes. That's how you got to do it.
Yeah.
Because it was horrendous.
Turn your mouse upside down. Works better that way.
Oh,
It was a lot of fun though.
But we've had the weirdest weather. We've had everything from like -2 degrees to like 31 degrees this week.
Wow.
It's just been nuts. It's
been like steady 20 degrees all day and about 9 all night, and that's it for the whole week.
I wish.
Might rain by the end of the weekend.
Well, we had 2 days of rain as well in there.
Yep, none of that here.
I don't know. I don't
We
care.
had 10 minutes of sprinkle.
I wish it would just figure out, just pick something.
Yeah.
Because you can't. You're absolutely freezing. It's like -2 of a night, so you're under 14 blankets, and then by 6 o'clock of a morning, it's like 22 degrees, and you're like, you're sweating your ass off, and then you get, by the time you get into work, it's 23, 24 degrees. Lunchtime hits 30, and then by 6 o'clock that night, it's back down to 8 degrees again. You're like, no wonder everybody's getting sick.
Yeah.
Just this weather is insane. So
It's terrible.
But at least the van's doing well. The electric van, it
Yep,
doesn't.
still loving it.
No issues. I love it because it's got climate control that you can set to come on at a certain time of the morning. So at 7 o'clock of the morning, I get it to come on and set the vehicle at 22 degrees, regardless of whether it's hot or cold. It'll just make the vehicle 22 degrees.
And you could do that if you went to go to the shops for a couple of hours or to the movies, and your van is sitting out in the sun.
Yeah.
But it can keep cool because the battery's there.
Yep. Yeah, you can tell it's got camping.
You got to put solar on it as well.
No, there's no point.
No point.
I mean, there would only be benefit to that. You're only going to fit about 500 watts on the roof, which, in terms of overall capacity, is very little compared to what the battery pack can hold. But if you were camping, there would be an advantage to that to keep the 12-volt side of it up, only insofar as you would minimise the drain on the traction battery. But it's not really
just wondering,
required.
because they had those EVs that the roof is all solar, so that you can leave your air conditioning going all day and stuff like that.
It would negate that sort of stuff. But it's not. I mean, in terms of range, it's not going to affect your range, really. But it does give you that benefit of being able to leave your aircon on or your heater on. Or the one thing other as well, in summer, because it gives you basically a second roof, so it does keep the vehicle cooler because you've got don't have direct sun hitting the roof of the vehicle.
Yeah.
So
are those vehicles all right, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, like it's the ENV 200 Nissan import from Japan. It's effectively a Nissan Leaf in a van body, basically. The only downside to it is it's the older Nissan Leaf, so it's only 100 and, well, actually, when I got it, it was 96 k's range is all it would allow.
Yep.
But I've given it a couple of full charge-discharge cycles, and I've hit it with the quick charges a couple of times.
Yep.
And it's revived the battery pack. The battery pack was just getting lazy because it sat around for so long. And it's brought it up to 120k range, which is what I expected it to have.
Yep. That's all you need.
Yeah, it's more than we need for what we do with it. And you can, if you've got the money, you can add the newer Leaf battery pack to it, which will double that, which will give you about 300k range. So it is possible to actually extend the range on it relatively cheaply, and cheaper than buying another vehicle anyway.
You'd probably have to have a business where you can have customers come visit to be able to do that.
It would help, yeah. I mean, when you have a work vehicle, it's better if you have work to work the work, have the work vehicle. Yes.
Yeah.
So, but I like it. No, it's good. It's a good talking point too. Everywhere I go, people want to talk about it. So
yeah.
So get some signage done.
Did you
up
get
in
that rolling start going?
What do you mean?
About last week that you wanted it so that
creep mode
starts roll. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like a normal automatic to drive now. You take your foot off the brake and it creeps, rather than just sitting stationary. Because I think that's dangerous. If you forget it's in drive and you take your foot off the brake, you've only got to bump the throttle and it'll launch.
Yep.
Whereas if it's in like creep mode, like an automatic, as soon as you take your foot off the brake, it'll start rolling. So you kind of are mentally aware that it's in gear. because you can't hear it. So,
Yeah.
so. But
I suppose we should thank these kind people who give us money.
I suppose so. You got patreon.com/AussieTechHeads. We've got a few people there. Of course, you can do PayPal, or you can do direct deposit, or you can send us cash in a birthday card.
Coffee.
Coffee. Well, why can I never remember what that one is?
ko-fi.com.
It's you know what it is. It's the dash that.
Why do they have a dash anyway? Did somebody already have kofi.com?
That's what I was wondering, but the dash messes me up every time. It's like, why? But yeah, you can go to ko-fi.com/AussieTechHeads. Get us there as well. You can leave buy us a coffee or whatever there, and we there's a few different ways of helping us out.
Now, did Glenn actually get a new computer, or is he still on brick potato?
I think he's waiting for his his crypto to launch or something. I don't know what he's doing. But we were talking a couple of weeks ago about speccing up a new system, so I think it's in the process of occurring.
Well, you know what one to tell him about, but make sure he gets all the updates.
yeah. Well, if you're running a Verizon, if you're running a Ryzen, and AMD just pumped out some major updates, so it's definitely worth looking into. So yes.
Should we do some news?
I suppose we can try.
Telstra will make all local and national calls placed from its 15,000 plus public payphones free. CEO Andrew Penn said in a social media post that he had made the decision to make all local and national calls free to standard fixed lines and standard Australian mobiles from their payphones. Telstra payphones are now free phones for everyone anywhere in Australia, he said in a separate statement. He said the payphones are an iconic part of the Australian landscape, but importantly, you may be wondering who uses them in today's society where everyone's got a smartphone. Well, in fact, we still get 11 million calls a year through our payphones, and importantly, more than 200,000 of those are to emergency type sites such as 000. Penn said the payphones were also important to someone fleeing domestic violence, sleeping rough, or just out of credit on their mobile. He noted they had played a crucial role during bushfire events when mobile networks were down, providing a lifeline for residents to let family know they were safe. Telstra said the standard national calls and SMS from Telstra payphones will be free from today. International and calls to premium and satellite numbers will still incur a cost, while Telstra Air remains free to eligible Telstra customers. Payphones will also become coinless from October 1, with Telstra phone cards recommended for dialing international and premium numbers. So that's pretty good.
Yeah, it's not so. I mean, let's face it, they're all on ISDN lines now, or all on internet lines now. So the physical call doesn't cost them anything anymore.
Yeah,
it's only the upkeep of the machine, and a lot of people who use the Wi-Fi aren't Telstra customers, so you pay for using the Wi-Fi. So the Wi-Fi side of it's going to be paying for it now.
Yeah.
I've used them a few times. I've either had a flat phone, or I don't want somebody to know my number, so I've rang them from a payphone.
Where do I get coins from? Who even carries coins these days?
Yeah, well, you could use on some of them. You can use your tap and go credit card.
Oh, okay. Yep.
Well,
that's how long it's been since I've used.
That's only on some of them. That's not all of them.
Yep.
But I mainly use them for the hotspot. Not so much here, but when you go out west in the middle of nowhere, there's no signal or anything. But that's great because you can get onto the hotspot from them, and they also act like a localized phone tower. So you not only have Wi-Fi access, but you actually have phone access, like a 3G phone tower as well, which is pretty cool. I've used the Wi-Fi a few times. We actually had friends of mine live not that far from one, but where they were, they couldn't get satellite, or they couldn't get internet or anything, and the only option was satellite, and they didn't want to pay a fortune. That was just back where they were. So where they were in a zone that technically was NBN fibre, but it hadn't been rolled out to their area. But because it had been designated, they couldn't get the discount on the satellite, which meant to get satellite was like $500 a month.
Jeez.
So we hooked up what's called a Yagi, which is effectively a signal booster, and we pointed it at the.
Wasn't he in the Karate Kid, Mr. Yagi?
Mr. Yagi. And we connected it and fired it at the phone box, and so we were using the 4G or the Wi-Fi signal from the
Nice.
phone box at his place, which was a good 500 meters down the road. So,
Yeah.
so yeah, we've used them a few times. The other thing they're handy too, most of them have, because they're pretty much all independent and they all basically, depending on where they are, for the most part, they use just the local Wi-Fi of the post office or wherever they're near. Some of them still have cables running to them. A lot of the rural ones use satellite. But most of them have battery backups in them. So even if you lose power, 9 times out of 10, the payphones still work.
Yep.
And the Wi-Fi on a lot of them will still work for quite a while too. So, but yeah, I'm kind of glad they haven't completely disappeared. But it was funny when we were explaining to, I can't remember who, we were talking to somebody about it, and Cam, my 5-year-old, he's like, "What's a payphone?"
Well, back in the day.
We're like, it's a phone, but it's Superman gets changed in a phone box. He's like, yeah. I said, well, it's one of those, and the phone's inside the box, and you got to go inside the box to make a phone call. And he goes, that doesn't seem very convenient.
No.
That was hilarious.
When I was growing up, Mum and Dad had the phone cut off, so I had to go for a walk. One time it was like 11 o'clock at night. I went for a walk down to the local newspaper shop where I had a paper run. I used the paper boy for there on my bike and make a phone call to the radio station to make a request and then try and run home
Before to hear
before the request.
it. We used to back in when they had the green ones with the actual dial on them.
Yep.
And I think it was the early orange ones as well. But you could actually ring a number and it would ring and it would only hang up once the other person answered. But it would actually ring and it didn't cost you anything to ring the number. And so we had a system in place that I could ring home, and depending on how long I let it run for, told Mum where she needed to pick me up.
Yeah.
If it was like, and it was like 2 rings was the local shops down the corner, 3 rings was the supermarket down the end of the street, 4 rings was my mate's place down the other side. So, like, depending on how many times it rung was depending on where I was.
Yeah.
So it was a really good system because I didn't have to carry money and I didn't have to, have money to use the phone.
Yep.
And didn't really need to have a conversation. I mean, she knew it was no different than me going, "Can you pick me up from the shops?" Because she knew by how many rings it was, that's where I was to be picked up from.
One of my friends used to do that because we didn't have the phone, so we'd go down to the payphone, we'd ring, and as soon as they pick up, it'd disconnect, and they're like, "Oh, he's ready to get picked up." So they come drive around, pick him up.
Yeah. The other thing you used to be able to do back in the day, and you can't do now, back when everything was on copper, is you could string a whole bunch of LEDs around your house and run it off the phone line.
Ah.
Because even in a blackout, the phone line was powered by the exchanges. So you had free power. Like, I lived in Geelong for like 18 months, and the first 3 months I was there, I didn't have power in the house.
Oh, all right. But you had Christmas lights, so that made it all
I
right.
literally had a string of Christmas lights running off the phone line.
You could celebrate.
It just ran through down the length of the hall.
Yeah.
And then I just had like candles and stuff in the other rooms. But like 90% of the things you wanted to do, I had gas stove, I had gas hot water.
Yep.
So 90% of the stuff you wanted to do, there was enough light being put off by the string of Christmas lights. And I didn't have the phone connected. Like, I physically had no phone line.
Yeah.
But the power's always there. They just disconnect the data signal.
Oh.
And so I had free power. The thing you got to watch is if you actually do have a phone line, you've got to be careful because it spikes from like 3 volts to like 60 volts to ring the. So you'll end up with an explosion going on when all your light bulbs explode.
All the way up the hall.
So, but no, it was one of those tricks you learn when you don't have any money.
What we used to love doing was dial the callback test line number and then hang up. So I go over to my grandparents' place and dial the number, starts ringing, hang
the
up,
phone up.
run into the lounge room
Yep.
and watching TV, and the phone rings, and they're like, I thought I heard the phone ringing, but I picked it up and there was no one there. There must be something wrong with the phone.
So that used to call the old talking clock back in the day.
Yeah. Just before midnight on New Year's Eve.
Yep, just make sure
you could hear it say, Happy New Year, everyone.
Yeah.
If you could get through.
Yeah, well, that was the other problem too. All the old analog exchanges. Actually, if you want to know how an old analog phone exchange works, on YouTube there's a guy called Look Mum No Computers, and he's an English guy, and he does all old school analog. So whether it's making an organ out of Furbies, or whether it's making an old analog telephone exchange, or he's really good. If you want to learn a lot of that older stuff, he's a really good watch. So I enjoy watching him do it. And he even goes and shows you how the old loops used to call. So you used to ring, say you'd ring a government organisation, and they were only open for certain hours, and outside of those hours they weren't there. But instead of having a standard sort of answering machine, they literally had these tape loops. And it was literally cassette tape looped. It kind of looked like a record player insofar as the tape just sat around the top and just ran through the head, and it just pull and push this tape around in a loop. And when your phone rang, it would pick up that'd pick up and feed through the spool, and you'd hang up. And it's really interesting how a lot of that old stuff used to work.
I'm gonna have to check that one out now. It sounds really interesting.
It is really cool. I'd never considered that to be a thing. Apparently, they used to use it a lot in radio stations. When you'd call into radio stations and the lines were busy, like they'd use their 10 lines or whatever, everyone else who'd call in would get these automated reels of tape. Or if they wanted to do remote, like there was a thing, I don't know if we had it here. He was saying in the UK, you used to be able to ring up, and they used to have the top 5 songs, and you could ring up and listen to the top 5 songs over the phone.
Oh, right.
And that's what they used to do every week. They'd record the top 5 songs onto this loop of tape, and then they'd just sit there and play all week. And you'd ring up and it'd start playing, and you'd hang up and it'd stop, and yeah.
Oh, wow. That's nuts.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, actually. So, Microsoft. So the other week we're talking about obviously how garbage Windows 11 is going to be, and how almost I think they did it deliberately so that they would sell Windows 365.
Yeah. Why buy Windows once when you can keep buying it every month?
Yeah, pretty much. Except they opened the trials for Windows 365 on Monday.
Yep.
And closed them on Tuesday.
What? Why?
Following significant demand, we've reached capacity.
Everyone wanted to try it, so we didn't want anyone to try it, so we shut it down.
Yeah. Basically, they maxed out their servers in like 12 hours.
Jeez.
But the thing is, they don't have numbers here, but they allocated X amount of trial places, and you had to sign up and you had to register and you had to be accepted on the trial to use the system. So however many people they accepted onto that system was too much for their system. Because it wasn't an open trial, it was a closed trial. So you would assume that if you were allowed
they would know how many.
You would assume you'd allow 5,000 people to use it, you'd have enough processing power for 5,000 people.
No.
But apparently not. They they literally closed it.
Were they using those servers that the Australian census and stuff use?
That's the one.
Next Tuesday is going to be fun, isn't it?
Oh,
yes. You're not going to be able to fill out the form.
We've already done it. So they've opened it up to do from now. From like last Monday, I think they opened it so that you can go and do it.
Somebody had commented on Facebook or something when they're in Sydney. It says, if you're in Sydney and you know where you're going to be next Tuesday, and they're like, everyone knows where they're going to be. They're not allowed to leave the house. I got a friend of mine who drives around food trucks to festivals. He's not allowed to go 5 kilometres. He can't even go to his bank.
Yeah.
Because his bank is more than 5 kilometres away from the house, but he does all this. He still has business papers to use to take to the bank. He's still got to do banking and tax and stuff at the bank every week, but he's not allowed to go there because it's more than 5
Well,
kilometers
he
away.
is, because it's classified as an essential service because it's required for his business, so he actually can. But
But his business, they said, is not an essential business.
it doesn't matter.
So therefore, they won't let him go. He's trying to go.
Nah,
Yeah.
you're approaching it the wrong way. If your business doesn't have to be essential business, but if you need to carry out work to keep your business operating, then you're allowed to do it.
Ah.
Yeah, you got to approach it from a different angle. But because we got the same, we've had similar issues here. But yeah, I mean, the funny thing is, I was reading something on Twitter. Something caught my eye on one of the headlines. That I don't normally read Twitter, but it was on one of the emails.
That's what I was going to say. I didn't think you ever log into your account.
Unless somebody actually @s me and sends me an actual tweet, I don't normally read it. But one of the emails they sent me caught my eye. It was actually for the work Twitter account, which is weird, which I actually do have. I don't know what it is, but I have it. And it was because I think it was open on Monday for the census, and they said website operational for 45 minutes or something. Or was it new record? Census website operational for 45 minutes before crash. So apparently it still went down, even with 100,000% of what it would normally have had. They still managed to crash it.
Do it. I'll have to try it tomorrow night or the weekend or something, see if we can get it out of the way before everyone does on Tuesday.
Yeah, it's so stupid, but they still can't handle the traffic they're not getting. So we'll see what happens there.
A long-term test of 15 security apps for Android points to Google's Play Protect being the worst alternative to shield users from popular mobile platform from threats of malware. An independent antivirus test security analysis put 15 security apps through an endurance test for 6 months and found most of them protected users well. However, Android's built-in security app, Google Play Protect, rated the worst by a large margin. The endurance test revealed that this service does not provide particularly good security. Every other security app offers better protection than Google Play Protect. While Google Play Protect got full 6 points for performance, AV Test rated the app as a solid 0.0 for both protection and usability. Top scorers on the test included security apps from Avast, AVG, Bitdefender, F-Secure, G-Data, Kaspersky, McAfee, NortonLifeLock, and Trend Micro. Even the lowest rated third-party security app, Icarus, was rated as 5.7 out of 6 for protection. 5 apps, Bitdefender, G-Data, McAfee, NortonLifeLock, and Trend Micro, were able to detect all of the thousands of malware and spyware programs over the 6-month period, both in real-time tests and against a reference set of malicious programs. In comparison, Google Play Protect scored only 68.8% in real-time tests and 76.6% against reference malware test. Google Play Protect also had problems detecting harmless apps with producing false positives. AV Test said Google Play Protect flubbed over 70 times in all the tests, which is why it got no points for protection. As a result, AV Test recommends users not rely on Google Play Protect, and they use an additional third-party security app such as the free Avast or AVG ones. Sounds like the way to go.
Yeah, I'm just looking. I'm trying to find the one on my phone. When you got a Xiaomi, they come with, I want to say it's My Community, MI Community, but I'm not 100% sure. I'm just trying to find it. And it's really good. It's caught a couple of rogue apps I didn't even realise I had that were. And its spam for SMS and phone call, its spam protection is on point, I'll tell you what.
I would like that. I got one just recently, and I can't remember what country it came from, but it said, "Hi, for you, Jason. Here's the link that you wanted." So they've got my name linked to the phone number as well, which is different. I've never had one of those before.
This actually has. I'm just trying to find it. The text message side of this literally has a spam folder where it automatically, you can see there, it doesn't even go to my phone. It goes straight into the spam folder. And it's caught, I've cleared it out recently, but it's caught so many spam text messages.
Mine doesn't catch any text ones, but I've had to ramp up all of my phone call spam protection on my phone because I was just getting at least 1 or 2 calls every single day that was just crap.
Well, I was going to say mine does the same for the phone as well. I'll just show you a day, for example. Well, there you go. When was this? The 7th of May, apparently, was a fantastic spam day. So all those red ones, they're all that it doesn't even ring my phone. It just automatically blocks them as spam. And then if you do make a phone call, if it's less than 10 seconds, because you go spam and you hang up, it goes, would you like to mark this number as spam and report it? So it actually asks you. It actually asks you if that was a spam call.
Yeah.
It's really good. I don't know what they're using for their back end, but I can't fault it. Like, it's even got their own virus scanner of some description on there as well.
Oh, that's good.
I put a external USB OTG thumb drive in. I had some friends' photos and stuff that I wanted to get, and they had a rogue I think it was a PNG, but a rogue file on there, and it picked it up. And like this thumb drive's we've been in circulation with this thumb drive for like 5 years.
Yeah.
We've put it on a heap of different computers and nothing's ever picked it up.
Oh, wow.
And it
Good
goes,
thing it did then.
this thing's such and such a Trojan. And I mean, it was one of those ones that would only activate under the exact perfect conditions, which has obviously never been triggered. But the amount of computers that this particular file was on, and it's never been picked up by any of the other virus scanners, but the phone picked it up.
Wow.
So yeah, I don't know what they're using for their protection, but it works.
Pretty good though.
Wonders. So, and that comes standard with all those Yamis. That's default. Like you don't have to do anything; it just automatically does all that.
Yep.
Which is neat because you don't have to worry about it, and it updates whatever it does in the background. So.
Yep.
So yeah, but so Afterpay. It's an Australian company. Nick Molnar, who is the one of the co-founders, he's known as Australia's youngest ever billionaire. He's only worth about $39 billion or something. But Afterpay is starting to take off internationally now. It's not just an Australian thing anymore. It's starting to become US and starting to work its way around. And then you've got Square, which was also an Australian startup, Jack Dorsey. And it's a personal, an FPOS terminal that's not hooked to one of the big banks. It's a Bluetooth FPOS terminal you can use on your phone or tablet or whatever. It takes,
They use it the board game night that I go to. It's got a little cafe there. They have the little square, and I just tap my Fitbit on it.
Yep, you can tap, you can insert. You can do manual entry as well. If the card fails, you can do manual entry. It does cost you a little bit extra, but so basically, there's these two really well doing Australian companies that are going gangbusters. They've decided that they want to merge.
Yeah.
Well, by merge, I say Square's decided to buy out Afterpay.
Yep.
And it'll be used inside Square's ecosystem, which will be perfect because the way there's set up will suit Afterpay to a T. It's also now in use by about 70 million Americans as well. So it's not only an Australian thing. It's between Afterpay and Square, there's 70 million Americans using it. There's the whole of Australia is using it to some degree.
Yep.
So Afterpay, offered whatever it is, $40 billion or something to. Square offered $40 billion to Afterpay to buy it. The co-founders were smart. They both kept what it is, 3% or 5% or something of the shares.
Yep.
So they're going to continually get money from it. But basically, the way the current payout will work is each of the two co-founders will be paid $2.7 billion in cash.
Wow.
And all the staff who are working there, because they were getting shares as part of their salary agreement, their shares went from 30 cents each to $126 each.
Whoa. Ka-ching.
So, it's basically 42 times multiplication. I think it worked. I think if I worked it out right, no, it's more than that. Oh no, that'd be right. So yeah, so they're all happy.
Yeah, I bet they
You know, they can quite happily hand in their shares and continue to work there if they want to. It doesn't really matter, you know. But I think it's actually one of the few mergers I'm happy about, because Afterpay always seemed like a it never seemed to fit. Like, you had ZipPay and Zip Money,
Yep.
which was fine. Then you had these others, and you sort of had Afterpay, which it always felt, from a merchant point of view, who used the back end of the system a lot when we were taking Afterpay orders, it never flowed. To do an Afterpay, whether it be online or whether in store, was really, really painful. It wasn't like a Zip Pay was literally a 10-second process, and you could process a Zip payment.
Yep.
But the after-payment process, you had to go through this multi-stage thing, and it literally took sometimes 10 or 15 minutes per customer, because we weren't a big enough merchant to have the merchant terminal access, which is literally you put their Afterpay ID in, that comes straight up and you can process it. We didn't have the option to do that because we weren't a big enough customer, didn't have enough of a turnover, and that cost a lot of money to have that implemented. So we're doing it through their web backend, and it was so painful. It really, really was, and it took a long time. The customer standing there looking at you, going, "Well, I'm just waiting for the system." So, but because they've got the Square Terminal and Afterpay has just introduced a card, like a credit card style card, it's going to work it perfectly, because they can literally come in, swipe their Afterpay card, and be gone. Like, it's going to be a 10-second exchange. It's going to be fantastic.
Yeah.
It also means if you're so to get Afterpay or to Square, whatever, you have to be established for at least 12 months, meet X amount of criteria before they'll allow you to use it. With this integration into Square, it basically means that if you're currently using Square as a merchant for work, you don't. There's a lot of those guidelines you won't have to meet, so you can basically accept Afterpay with very, very little hassle. So you're immediately increasing your customer base just by the ability to accept Afterpay. So
Nice.
it's going to be really good. It's one of the few mergers of recent times that I'm quite happy with. I think and it's not a full merger. Like, the companies are still saying trading as separate companies, insofar as there's not massive layoffs and not massive. They both realise that each company performs their own task.
Yep.
So whilst they're going to integrate from a user standpoint, for the most part, they're going to remain separate development companies, effectively.
Yep.
So it's really good.
That's good.
And also, Einstein and Moeller, who are the guys who do Afterpay, they're staying there. They're not leaving.
Oh.
They're not taking their $2 billion and going home.
No.
They're actually going to stay on, at least for a while, and see the transition and continue to do what they do. And they're still,
Still doing all right.
they're still doing their job. So why not?
An Australian mathematician has discovered what may be the oldest known example of applied geometry on a 3,700-year-old Babylonian clay tablet. Known as SI 427, the tablet bears a filled plan measuring the boundaries of some land. The tablet dates back from the Old Babylonian period between 1900 and 1600 BCE and was discovered in the late 19th century in what is now Iraq. It had been housed in the Istanbul Archaeological Museum before Dr. Daniel Mansfield from the University of New South Wales tracked it down. Mansfield and Norman Wildberger, an associate professor at University of New South Wales, had previously identified another Babylonian tablet as containing the world's oldest and most accurate trigonomic table. At the time, they speculated the tablet was likely to have had some practical use, possibly in surveying or construction. That tablet, Plimpton 322, described right-angled triangles using Pythagorean triples, three whole numbers which the sum of the squares of the first two equals the square of the third. For example, 32 plus 42 equals 52. You just don't accidentally come up with trigonometry. You're usually doing something practical, Mansfield said. Plimpton 322 set him on a quest to find other tablets from the same period that contained Pythagorean triples, eventually leading him to Psi 427. Psi 427 is about a piece of land that's being sold, he said. In the cuneiform script with its characteristic wedge-shaped indentations, the tablet describes a field containing marshy areas as well as threshing floor and nearby tower. The rectangles depicting the field have opposite sides of equal length, suggesting the surveyors of that time period had devised a way to create perpendicular lines more accurately than before. Much like what we have today, you've got private individuals trying to figure out where their land boundaries are, and the surveyor comes out, but instead of using a piece of GPS equipment, they used Pythagorean triples. Through Plimpton 322 and Psi 427 both use Pythagorean triples. They predate Greek mathematician Pythagoras by more than 1,000 years. Once you understand what Pythagorean triples are, your society has reached a particular level of mathematical sophistication, he said. Psi 427 contains three Pythagorean triples: 3, 4, 5, 8, 15, 17, and 5, 12, 13. So 1,000 years before Pythagoras, they already knew what they were doing.
You got to admit, though, that that's a 3,000-year-old tablet and it's still displaying the same information. It's a pretty shitty refresh rate.
Yeah. But it does have long-term data storage.
Long-term data storage and a really, really good battery.
Yeah. You try that with any of today's devices.
Most of them won't even last 3,000 hours, let alone 3,000
You're not
years.
upgrading your iTablet every 3,000 years.
Given the treatment they went through too, the abuse they copped.
That's right, yeah.
So, yeah, no, it's this is the thing. Like, Pythagoras' theorem is our Greek background into that into that architecture or that design or that patternage or that number numerology or however you want to describe it. But if the Greeks had it figured out, then the Babylonians have it figured out, the Egyptians would have it figured out. Like,
everyone, yeah.
They might have got to the numbers a different way, but they all had their system of working that out.
Yeah.
Look at the Romans. They've built arches. They built freestanding arches that modern architects struggle to figure out how they've done them. Like the Colosseum with the cantilever ceilings and stuff. That's something that we can only just figure out how to do with steel. We can't do it with concrete and brick.
Yeah.
Like the even some of the older things, like look at some of the old Roman roads. They're still using, and even the Italian roads and things like that, they're still using the same cobblestone road now that they were using 3, 4, 5,000 years ago.
Yeah.
So as I say, once what was old was once new again. There's so much stuff we forget in our history, especially when our history gets manipulated intentionally. But even if it doesn't, there's so much stuff that just goes by the wayside that somebody not necessarily discovers, but rediscovers something we already knew.
Yeah.
We'd just forgotten that we knew it.
Yeah.
And that
they
can
have
happen.
some crazy mechanical stuff that they find sunken on ships that have been underwater for 3,000 years, and they go down there, get the artifacts. They're like, how the hell did they make this?
Yeah.
It's like plots all of the stars, or tells you the year or the tides and all this stuff.
Yeah,
Why don't they
that's
figure
it.
that out?
And sometimes it's not only every 10,000 year cycle. It can be 2 or 3 times in your lifetime cycle. So certain things just go by the wayside for 20 years, and all of a sudden they get rediscovered again.
Yeah.
Not through, yeah. And then the old timers are sitting there going, yeah, I know we got one there. You know, so it's not always a good thing, but I think that's why history is such an important. And when I say history, I'm not talking, you know, I'm not talking queens and kings of England, and I'm talking actual society history and what foundation and what forced that society to function. Like in I think it's in Babylonia. I could be wrong, but there's these massive underground cities.
Yep.
You know, I want to say the Greeks. I'm not 100% off the top of my head. I can't recall it, but they were coming and they were poisoning their waterways and destroying their crops and burning their buildings down. So these guys went down and down and down and down and down, and it's, you know, several hundred meters by several hundred meters of tunnels and walkways and rooms and stuff, and then there's another story below that, another story below that, and each story's got its own water, each story's got its own food. Yeah. You know, and they just built, and it didn't happen over thousands of years. It happened over a couple of years because they had to get underground. Yeah. And there's these massive underground cities that we would struggle to build in a lifetime, and they're built in a couple of years.
Yeah.
You know, so it's yeah. I think sometimes just the history of society can unravel more than you know, anything else, like whether it's technology, whether it's however they worked. The technology is not necessarily new. Like, it's quite possible that the Babylonians had power, that we've discovered artifacts that could
Some
potentially
sort of
be made to make a battery. Whether or not they did is another question, but they could potentially have done it.
All the ingredients are there.
And given that there's been cases where they've found metals and metallurgy that they weren't aware that they were doing at the time, things like electrolysis or galvanization may have been a valid process in using that electricity. So it's not out of the realm that they had chroming and galvanizing and electrolysis before it was, you know, we modern scientists discovered it again.
Yeah.
Well, I was reading an article before the show. I decided not to do it, but Italian or French scientists have discovered how to get moisture out of the atmosphere.
Yeah.
Like, but hang on, that's not that's not new. That's old. That's condensation. That's literally what the atmosphere does that by itself. Yeah. And there's a company in Arizona in America who will put these modules on your property or on your roof, and they're literally a solar panel with a condensing coil behind it. And even in the arid areas of the desert, they'll collect enough moisture on that condensing coil, and it drips down a tray and into a tank, and it'll fill, you know, with 4 or 5 of these modules, you'll fill a couple 100-litre tank every day with just moisture from the air.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, so it's not new. It's just harnessing things in a different way.
Yeah.
If you want a classic example of that, there's a. Let me just quickly find it. There's a park. I think it was in California. And it was called Coral Castle. And the story goes that Coral Castle. Here we go. Yeah, Mystery of Coral Castle. And this guy had just a fantastic grasp on physics. And this guy built this thing called the Coral Castle. It's thousands and thousands of tons sedimentary rock that looks like coral, and he's manipulated it and carved it and cut it and lifted it and moved it into all statues and obelisks and stuff like that. but like he was very sneaky. Like he would only move these massive blocks really, really late of night. So these people never saw how these massive big concrete or these massive big stone blocks moved from there to be stood up over here into an obelisk and stuff like that. There's a handful of photos that's showing him using block and tackles and levers and all the stuff that we would expect. And this is only recent. This is like 1923. And this is stuff that we would expect him to use, but he was really sneaky and never actually did it when anybody saw it. But he had one thing where he had the gate to the Coral Castle itself was a big lump of stone, and he'd figured out the exact center point of balance of this gate, exactly where it balances, exactly where it's to the point where even a slight breeze would swing this massive 100-ton bit of stone backwards and forwards in the breeze.
Yep.
And he had it balancing on an old, if I remember correctly, it was an old Model A truck axle.
Right.
And after, 50, 60 years, this thing finally failed just from rust and grime and garbage and lack of maintenance. Because this guy died in the 50s, I think, and it's been looked after by other people. But the dumb part about this, that he died in 51, yeah. He was a Latvian immigrant. His name was Edward Leedskeen, and he was 5 foot tall and weighed 100 pounds or 45 kilos, which is why everybody had so much trouble believing he could move all this stuff. But he was using levers and block and tackle and mechanical advantage. But the thing is with this gate, when this gate stopped swinging and stopped moving, they had like scientists and engineers and university professors and everybody trying to figure out how he made this gate work, because none of them could wrap their head around the fact that the thing was just, he spent so many days just perfectly balancing this thing to do it. So when they finally, and then also when they fixed the gate and they changed it, and because of the way you had the axle concreted into the bottom of the gate, they had to chip apart some of the concrete to pull the axle out, which of course completely changes the center of gravity of this gate. So when they put it back on the same point of axis, it hasn't performed the same way, and they couldn't figure out why, and they're saying, oh, he's using levitation, he's using this and that. No, he's just smarter than you. That's literally all it was. But that's just a modern example of ancient techniques. Every technique he used to build that place was thousands of years old, just reapplied in a modern principle, and it still to this day confounds people because they can't wrap their head around the fact that this guy can move this stuff all by himself.
Yeah.
So
it's been lost to time now.
But yeah, look up Coral Castle. It's really, really intriguing.
Is that one of the ones where they have where the gates and doors fit with millimeter precision?
Yeah.
It's like
the solid stone carvings and
yep.
And it's a great read. And there's this like there's all these poles and stuff around the place that people couldn't figure out what they used for, and there was like big tripods, and people thought it was like a power system and all sorts of stuff. And when you actually look at it and you think about it, it's actually quite obvious. What I won't say because it'll give it away, but when you look at where they are, how they're designed to do, what they're designed to do, it's actually incredibly obvious what they're used for. But there's been stumping scientists for decades, apparently.
Yeah.
So nice. Yeah. So yeah. Anyway, enough ranting.
Is that it for your stories?
That's all she wrote.
Alrighty, thanks for listening to the Aussie Tech Head Show. We can be found at Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Patreon, and Coffee. Email us willwarlock at aussietechheads.com.au and go to aussietechradio.com, 24/7 playback of tech-related shows. We'll see you next time.
Bye. Uh-oh. It's doing the thing again. No, here we go.